Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going, well, deep into the world of industrial and technological power. We've got a fascinating stack of sources here.
We really do. They cover almost 150 years.
Exactly, from historical titans right up to today's tech billionaires. And our mission really is to dissect the anatomy of huge business success. We're looking at the ambition, the power, the wealth concentration.
And framing that central question for you, the listener, is what we're seeing now fundamentally different. I mean, this age of data, AI, massive scale.
Right.
Is the nature of overwhelming success changing? Or are we just seeing the same old patterns? Ruthlessness, control, concentrated wealth, but amplified. Finding new ways, maybe more scalable ways, using technology.
In ways the Rockefellers could only have dreamt of, perhaps.
Precisely. We've got biographies, financial analysis, tech research. It's quite a mix.
It is, and we've structured this to connect the dots. So first we'll look at the price of innovation today, the, let's say, intense management styles in tech.
Often brutal, based on these sources.
Then we'll shift to how data itself is creating these, well, almost untouchable monopolies globally.
The age of data dominance.
And finally, we'll loop back, connect these modern plays to the enduring patterns, the historical context. Think opacity, manipulation, how wealth sticks, going back to the industrial barons.
Quite a story arc.
It is. So let's jump right in. Let's unpack the human cost of moving incredibly fast. Okay, so first up, these intense, sometimes really brutal management styles. We see this again and again in the sources for some, well, iconic tech leaders. And the thing that just leaps out is this duality, isn't it? How can leaders who are, changing the world, achieving revolutionary success?
Yeah, the visionaries.
How can they also create these incredibly high pressure, sometimes abusive or just hyper-controlling environments inside their own companies?
Well, it might speak to the kind of personality needed for that level of success. The sources sort of suggest that the same, what's the phrase used? Reality distorting willfulness.
Yes.
The very thing you need to, defy markets, challenge physics, invent something totally new, that same energy often just steamrolls people.
Runs roughshod over them.
Exactly. The leaders we're looking at here, they didn't get there through, let's say, consensus building. It was relentless focus, often singular focus. And that inevitably has a cost, a human cost, for the people around them.
And we have some pretty raw examples, starting with Elon Musk, right? There's a really jarring anecdote about a young engineer at Tesla.
Oh, yeah. The Gage Coffin story is powerful. He was a manufacturing engineer working on robotics.
Right.
And the source describes this scene late on a Saturday night. Musk finds a robotic arm, one installing a cooling tube, is misaligned. It's causing a huge production holdup.
A bottleneck.
A major one. And Coffin, who apparently had been pushing himself like crazy 7 days a week for months, sleeping out of a suitcase trying to hit targets.
Just grinding.
Totally. He gets summoned to the factory floor for this confrontation with Musk.
And how did that play out? The source describes it as escalating very fast.
It's extremely fast. Coffin's trying to diagnose it as code, design, tooling, basic engineering troubleshooting.
Like Lang logic.
Right. And Musk just cuts him off. Demands, did you fucking do this? And when Coffin apparently hesitates, trying to process under that pressure, Musk calls him an idiot, tells him, get the hell out and don't come back. Fired. Just like that, on the spot.
Wow, that's staggering. But was that just, one guy losing his temper? Or was it more calculated?
The fallout suggests it was definitely calculated, a display of power to enforce this culture of absolute, immediate compliance.
Just so.
The source notes the cascade effect.
Yeah.
Coffin's project manager, fired a week later. That manager's manager, fired the week after that.
Wow.
It reinforces that description of Musk having a reality-distorting willfulness and a readiness to run roughshod over naysayers. The source calls this steeliness almost a superpower for achieving massive things, even if it leads to these emotional blow-ups.
And that combativeness, it wasn't just people, right? It was applied to the engineering problems themselves. The Raptor engine for Starship.
Oh, absolutely. That engine was incredibly complex, seen as maybe too complex to mass-produce cheaply, visually described as a spaghetti bush of pipes.
Sounds complicated.
It was. And Musk's reaction wasn't, let's workshop this. It was fire the person in charge of design, personally take over as VP of propulsion.
Just takes control.
Total control. With the goal of driving the cost down to maybe $200,000, a tenth of what it was. That's sheer will overriding expert consensus. Singular, combative control.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Back a generation, Bill Gates. A different style, maybe. More intellectual intensity.
Definitely different flavor, but equally demanding internally. The culture at Microsoft, as the sources describe it, was deliberately confrontational.
Deliberately?
Yeah. Programmers were kind of encouraged to challenge assumptions, even Gates's, but he always pushed back harder. Expected constant readiness, peak performance.
There's that quote from a programmer, right? They'd show something clever.
Yeah. And Gates's immediate reaction, relentlessly, would be, "Why didn't you do this 2 days ago?"
Ouch! Constant pressure.
That style, the sources argue, actually worked for Microsoft.
Right.
It built mental toughness, kept people from getting complacent. High burnout, for sure, but it generated speed.
And that ruthlessness, it wasn't just internal, it spilled into market tactics early on.
Oh, definitely. Tactics that, well, bordered on the unethical, even back then.
The Digital Equipment Corporation case, DEC, back in '82.
That's a prime example of leveraging power. DEC wanted Microsoft Word for their new Rainbow computer.
Right.
But the Rainbow was initially built for a rival operating system, CP/M.
Okay.
Gates saw the leverage immediately. DEC really wanted Word, which wasn't even out yet, but everyone knew it would be huge.
So Gates
persuaded them.
Putting it mildly. He essentially pressured DEC to also offer his DOS operating system as an option on the Rainbow.
So he used the carrot of Word, this amazing unreleased app,
to force them to carry his other product, DOS, which was competing directly with the Rainbow's native OS.
That's Platform Control 101, isn't it? Raw power leverage. It forced a major hardware company to help build the DOS ecosystem.
Which eventually crushed CP/M.
Precisely. Brilliant tactics, maybe, but definitely strong arm. Shows that winning platform wars often requires that kind of edge.
Okay, one more quick look. Steve Jobs. The sources describe him differently again. Not exceptionally smart, analytically.
Right, more intuitive. A magician genius, blending poetry and processors.
But that genius came with ferocity.
Yeah, ferocity is the word used. Made working with him as unsettling as it was inspiring. And unlike Gates's perhaps more calculated approach, Jobs' control seemed deeply emotional. He wasn't adept at containing his emotions.
Volatile?
Could be. There's that story about Jerry Wozniak, Steve Wozniak's dad, confronting him.
Oh, right. Telling Jobs he hadn't produced anything, didn't deserve credit.
Exactly. And Jobs didn't get angry, apparently. He started to cry. Shows how raw that ego and vulnerability were.
And that emotional side played out in management, too.
Absolutely. Look at Jeff Raskin, key in the early Mac project. He wrote a memo to the Apple chairman criticizing Jobs, calling him a dreadful manager.
Oh.
Jobs got his hands on that memo. Raskin fired immediately.
So whether it's calculated firings, strategic platform leverage, or impulsive reactions.
The pattern seems to be leaders who need environments of extreme intensity. Zero tolerance for dissent, really.
And that idea of total control, whether through fear or emotion, that leads us perfectly into the next stage. How monopolies are built today. Through data.
Yeah, it's a perfect transition. Because if the 20th century titans built their empires on complex manufacturing, owning the whole supply chain, vertical integration.
Steel mills, oil refineries.
Exactly. Physical assets. The sources are crystal clear. Today, for the current titans, data is the core. It's all about algorithmic implementation. Control has shifted from physical stuff to information infrastructure.
That's a huge shift. So what are the absolute must-haves for dominance in this AI era, according to the sources?
3 key things for successful AI. 1, big data, massive amounts of relevant data. 2, computing power, the hardware to crunch it all. And 3, talented engineers who can build strong algorithms.
Okay, data, compute, talent.
But here's the crucial economic twist. Once your computing power and engineering talent reach a certain, let's say, baseline level, the quantity and quality of the data you possess becomes the single most decisive factor. It dictates how powerful, how accurate, how profitable your algorithms are.
And that creates a cycle, right? Almost anti-competitive by its nature.
Totally. It feeds on itself. The sources warn explicitly that AI doesn't just make things more efficient. It introduces a monopolistic tendency to dozens of industries. It fundamentally undermines normal market competition.
How does that work?
It leads to the fast emergence of an AI-powered industry champion. Think of it like a flywheel.
Okay.
The more data they gather, the better their AI gets. Better AI attracts more users. More users generate even more data.
Which makes the AI even better.
Exactly. Just keep spinning, reinforcing the leader's advantage until, as the source puts it, they are entirely untouchable. That data hoard becomes this impenetrable moat around their business.
Wow. Entirely untouchable. That sounds pretty final. Well, and this isn't just theoretical, is it? The sources suggest this race for data dominance is already well underway, with clear frontrunners.
Oh, it's happening right now. The sources state that Chinese and American companies have already built massive leads over the rest of the world.
What about other tech hubs, like Canada, UK, France? They have great researchers.
They do. Top-notch labs, brilliant minds, but they're missing the crucial ingredients to scale up. They lack the huge unified user base generating standardized data, and they often lack the dynamic venture capital ecosystem needed to quickly turn breakthroughs into dominant companies.
So the talent might be there, but not the ecosystem or the massive data pools.
Largely, yes. Outside of perhaps DeepMind in London, the vast majority of the really key AI players, the foundational companies, the top engineers, are already concentrated in the US and China.
And we're seeing this dominance play out in specific areas.
Yes, across key verticals, self-driving cars, for instance, where getting enough training data is a huge barrier to entry.
Right.
Facial recognition needs enormous databases, often governmental or quasi-governmental.
Right.
Language translation, same thing. Requires vast text and speech data.
And even the academic world reflects this power shift.
It does. There's a study cited that looked at top AI journals and conferences between 2006 and 2015.
What did it find?
It found the percentage of papers with authors having Chinese names almost doubled. Went from about 23% to nearly 43%.
Wow, a huge jump.
A massive jump. And while some of those researchers are working overseas, the study indicated the majority are based right there in China. They're building the brain trust and hoarding the data needed to win in sector after sector.
Okay, so you have this intense concentration of power fueled by data. But what about legal challenges? Antitrust, surely that kicks in.
Well, that brings us to what the sources call the antitrust paradox. It's a major shield for these data empires.
A paradox. How so?
Historically, antitrust law in the U.S., for example, usually requires proving that a monopoly is actually harming consumers. Typically, that means showing they're using their power to raise prices or stifle innovation that would benefit users.
Okay, standard monopoly behavior.
Right. Think of John D. Rockefeller crushing rivals, then jacking up kerosene prices. But here's the paradox with AI monopolies.
Yeah.
They are likely to deliver, and I'm quoting here, better and better services at cheaper prices. Why? Because the AI itself drives incredible efficiency and productivity gains.
So they get dominant, maybe crush competitors using their data advantage?
Exactly. They build that untouchable moat.
But the actual service for the consumer gets better or cheaper or even stays free.
Precisely. So even if a Google or an Amazon or some future AI giant controls 90% of a market, if the end user is getting a fantastic, efficient, low-cost service, where's the consumer harm in the traditional legal sense?
The current laws struggle to find it.
They struggle mightily. The legal framework wasn't really built for a monopoly that wins by being too good or too efficient, using data as its weapon. The question shifts from, are they charging too much, to, are they simply too powerful, which is a much harder legal case to make under current doctrine.
That's a fundamental challenge, which actually leads us nicely into looking at those historical parallels. How did the old barons handle power and scrutiny? Right, let's bridge that gap. We've seen the intense management, the data monopolies. Now, how does this compare to the industrial giants of the past? Specifically, let's look at John D. Rockefeller and Andrew Carnegie.
The parallels in terms of sheer control are really striking, even though their tools were physical oil and steel. Rockefeller Sr. managed to grab control of nearly 90% of the U.S. refined oil market. The sources use phrases like piratical flair and tactical brilliance.
90%. That's staggering control. But what's really interesting is that he didn't necessarily crush every single competitor, did he?
No, and that's a key point. He strategically tolerated smaller players. It wasn't because they posed a threat.
It was political.
Purely political calculation. This directly connects to how modern digital platforms might maintain a marketplace facade. Rockefeller let, quote, 100 tiny refineries exist as minor nuisances.
Why? What was the benefit?
They served a critical political function. They provided a mirage of competition. When facing public anger or regulators, he could point to these small guys and claim the oil industry was full of vibrant competition. It justified Standard Oil's dominance.
Clever political cover, driven by PR and legal defense, not economics.
Exactly. And there's another layer here, Rockefeller's internal mindset. It connects back to that reality-distorting willfulness we talked about with modern founders.
So
He seemed driven by a deep need to justify his own actions, at least to himself. He developed these elaborate justifications for his business methods, even his harsh religious views, but kept them private.
So confident in his actions, but secretive.
Very secretive publicly. When talking to biographers later, he was apparently voluble rather than candid, always defending the trusts, never expressing regret. He genuinely seemed to believe he was doing great work by bringing cheap, reliable kerosene to everyone. That unwavering self-belief, despite the collateral damage, seems to be a common thread.
Okay, let's turn to Andrew Carnegie. We see a different kind of duality there, maybe more focused on image management. His reputation changed quite dramatically.
Oh, massively. From ruthless steelmaker to, later in life, peacemaker.
A deliberate rebranding.
It looks like it. Very similar pattern to Rockefeller, and you could argue similar to today's tech philanthropists. Ruthless accumulation, followed by very strategic reputation shaping. During his career, he was known for being aggressive, especially around things like the Homestead strike.
Right, very controversial.
But just 3 years into retirement, the sources show he'd successfully remade his public image into this peacemaker, an advocate for international arbitration.
And he used philanthropy strategically, not just charity.
Absolutely. Opening the expanded Carnegie Institute, donating that huge dinosaur skeleton, the Diplodocus carnegie.
Ah, yes, the dinosaur named after him.
It cemented this legacy of cultural benefactor, far removed from the grit and violence of steel production. It was large-scale image management.
But behind the scenes, the sources showed the wealth accumulation wasn't always just about, building better steel mills. There were more ambiguous financial dealings.
Yes, there's a specific example from 1871. A confidential letter confirms Carnegie and a partner were splitting profits from reselling Gilman Railroad bonds.
So financial maneuvering, not industrial production.
Essentially, yes, leveraging access and perhaps insider knowledge. By March 1872, Carnegie personally pocketed over $29,000 from this. The source points out that's equivalent to over $6 million today.
Wow. Okay, so complex financial dealings were part of the mix.
Definitely part of the wealth-building engine. And that willingness to use, let's say, less than direct methods, it even popped up in his personal life. When he finally decided to marry Louise Whitfield, he used subterfuge, as the source puts it. He arranged for friends to invite her and her mother to a cottage near where he was staying.
Why the secrecy?
Because he apparently couldn't bring himself to tell his own mother directly about the marriage. His mother's health was failing, and he avoided the confrontation. It shows a pattern, perhaps, of manipulating circumstances to avoid difficult situations, whether personal or professional.
Speaking of avoiding things, accountability. He wasn't exactly transparent with investigators either, particularly about government help like tariffs.
Not at all. When Congress investigated the protective tariffs that benefited American steel, he just flatly denied ever asking the government for them.
Despite benefiting hugely.
Right. And when asked a direct business question, the cost to produce a ton of steel billets, his partner, Henry Clay Frick, just shut it down, called it privileged information, didn't want competitors to know.
So opacity seems to be a constant theme, doesn't it? Whether it's modern tech giants using efficiency to sidestep antitrust, or historical barons dodging questions on costs and tariffs.
It's an enduring pattern of power. Maximize advantage, minimize scrutiny, control the narrative. Hashtag Shag45. The mechanism of deepening inequality and rent-seeking. And this consistent pattern of control and wealth hoarding brings us right to the big picture. How do these massive fortunes sustain themselves? How do they shape the economy, the politics, especially when inequality is growing?
We have some really interesting historical data in the sources about that relationship between growth and who actually benefits. It's not automatic, is it?
Far from it. That's a crucial structural point. Look at the early to mid-19th century Britain, France. The Industrial Revolution is taking off. Economic growth is accelerating.
You'd expect wages to rise.
You would. But workers' wages actually stagnated at very low levels during that period. Meanwhile, the capital share of national income, profits, rents, interest going to the owners that went up considerably.
So the investors got richer, the workers didn't, even as the economy grew.
For a long time, yes. It wasn't until the last third of the 19th century that wages started to catch up a bit. It shows growth doesn't automatically lift all boats equally.
And flash forward to modern times, particularly in places like the U.S., this concentration is even more extreme.
The numbers are pretty stark. In the U.S., the share of national income going to the very top, the top 0.1%.
The top 1,000th.
Right. That share went from about 2% to nearly 10% over recent decades. That's a five-fold increase. The source calls it unprecedented. And this ties directly into that core economic idea the sources highlight.
3G-ator.
Okay, we need to break down RG dollars.
Yeah.
What does that actually mean, and why is it so important for inequality?
It's fundamental. $3 is the rate of return on capital, what existing wealth earns from investments like stocks, bonds, real estate, passive income, essentially.
The return on existing wealth.
And $3 is the rate of economic growth, how fast the overall economy is expanding, which tends to drive wage growth for average workers.
Got it. Growth of the whole pie. So when $3 is consistently greater than 2, it means wealth accumulated in the past grows faster than the economy itself and faster than incomes from labor.
Can you give us an analogy?
Sure. Think simple. Someone inherits $100 million, someone else earns $100,000 a year. If the economy grows at 2%, the worker might get a $2,000 raise.
Okay.
But if the inherited capital earns a 5% return, that $100 million generates $5 million in income that year. The gap just widens automatically. Wealth concentrates because capital is compounding faster than wages are growing.
And the sources say this divergence can become extreme.
Yes, potentially reaching unprecedented proportions, especially globally. And crucially, large fortunes often have access to better advice and opportunities, so they tend to grow even faster than smaller fortunes, further accelerating the inequality.
And complex finance plays a role in accelerating this, like the leveraged buyout, the LBO.
LBOs are a key example of how finance can generate massive returns, sometimes disconnected from actually building a business. Early deals, like KKR's first fund back in '76, showed a huge potential. They turned about $25 million into over $500 million eventually, mostly using borrowed money leverage.
Huge returns through financial engineering.
Exactly. Now, the sources note the LBO game got tougher after the excesses of the 1980s. Remember all those junk bond deals and hostile takeovers?
Oh, yeah. Led to some spectacular collapses.
Right. So afterwards, lenders got much stricter. Back in the Wild West days, firms might put down only 10% equity, or even less, borrowing the rest.
Mostly debt.
Mostly debt. But through the 90s and 2000s, lenders started demanding much more skin in the game, 20%, 30% equity stakes. It made the deals less purely about debt manipulation.
So the model evolved, but the sources say private equity today is more about opportunism.
Yeah, less about the classic LBO formula and more about finding any edge, regulatory loopholes, market inefficiencies, structural advantages, which leads right into this concept of rent-seeking.
Rent-seeking. Explain that. It's not about creating new value.
Not primarily. Rent-seeking, in economics, means using your position, your influence, often political muscle, to get a larger slice of the existing economic pie rather than making the pie bigger.
Okay, like extracting value rather than creating it.
Exactly. And the sources give clear examples. One, bankers whose firms got taxpayer bailouts during the financial crisis. That's a massive wealth transfer enabled by political clout.
Okay, that's pretty direct. What's another example?
The tax code itself. Think about private equity fund managers. A large chunk of their earnings often comes as carried interest, which is taxed at the low capital gains rate, currently around 15–20% in the U.S., not the much higher ordinary income tax rate.
Even though it's basically compensation for their management work.
Right. They didn't invent a new widget. They used lobbying and influence to maintain a favorable tax treatment. It lets them keep a bigger share of the profits generated. Classic rent-seeking amplifying wealth concentration.
So structural advantages, political influence. And speaking of influence, the sources detail how vast wealth translates into organized, sometimes hidden, political power. The Koch network is a major case study here.
Yes, the sources describe the Koch network by 2012 as effectively building their own private political party. It went way beyond just donating to candidates.
How so? What did it involve?
It was a whole infrastructure, commissioning their own polling, building a massive voter database, hiring top political operatives.
A comprehensive machine.
And crucially, the funding was structured to be opaque.
Deliberately so. They set up this coalition about 17 allied conservative groups, each targeting different demographics, like the Libre Initiative for Latino voters. This structure helped mask their centralized source of funding.
Made it look more like a grassroots movement.
Perhaps. And a key tool for this opacity was the use of donor-advised funds, or DAFs. Specifically, Donors Trust is mentioned.
How do DAFs obscure funding? How is that different from a regular foundation? Okay, so a traditional private foundation, like the Ford Foundation or Gates Foundation, has to publicly disclose who it gives grants to each year. And they have to pay out a minimum percentage of their assets annually. That's the price for the tax-exempt status, minimum transparency.
Right.
Donor-advised funds get around that. Wealthy donors contribute money to the DA, get their tax deduction immediately, but the DF then pools the money and makes grants under its own name. The original source of the funds becomes obscured.
So donors trust makes the grant, not the individual Poff brother or other conservative donor.
Exactly. The source notes donors trust distributed around $750 million between 1999 and 2015, effectively bypassing the transparency rules that apply to private foundations. It allows immense fortunes to fuel political activity with significant anonymity. Economic power translates directly into political machinery, often without clear public accountability. #TagG, conclusion and final thought.
So where does this leave us? We've taken quite a journey. We looked at the brutal side of modern tech leadership, the firings, the pressure, the platform power plays.
The reality-distorting willfulness.
All right. Then we saw how data itself creates these potentially untouchable AI oligarchies driven by that relentless data flywheel.
Only what kind of moat?
And then we found these deep echoes in history, Rockefeller's mirage of competition, Carnegie's complex finances and image management. The patterns feel remarkably consistent, don't they? Innovation under pressure, monopoly or oligarchy forming, and wealth concentrating systemically. Often helped by that simple truth, the most of trucks.
I think the most striking takeaway, really, across all eras, is just how hard it is to challenge these concentrations of power once they're established. The sources strongly suggest that historically, the only things that have significantly dented inequality, that have really disrupted that daughter-G dynamic, have been massive external shocks.
Like the world wars.
Exactly, cataclysmic events. Short of that kind of massive disruption, the basic mechanics of wealth accumulation, both economic, through returns on capital, and political, through influence and rent-seeking, they just tend to keep grinding forward, fueled by efficiency, sometimes secrecy, and always structural advantages.
The machine just adapts and keeps running maybe on different fuel data instead of oil or steel.
Well put.
And this leaves us with, I think, a really challenging final thought for you, the listener, circling back to today's data monopolies. If this new AI oligarchy genuinely does deliver better, cheaper, maybe even free services to consumers.
Services made possible by these incredible productivity gains from AI.
Then do we need to fundamentally rethink what we mean by consumer harm in antitrust law? If the service is great, but the power concentration is immense and maybe competition is stifled, what's the trade-off?
Do we accept this consolidation of power, this control over data, as just the inevitable price of progress, the unavoidable outcome of incredibly powerful technology?
That feels like the core tension, doesn't it? Balancing innovation, efficiency, market power, and ultimately democratic accountability in this new age. Something to definitely keep thinking about.